I'm not rushing you. You can do that intro whenever you want to.
I will go ahead and do it. My
All
name is
right.
Jeff.
Oh boy, it's going to be one of those days.
No, it's not. Bad rehearsal, good show. That is that's kind of a rule, I think.
At least I got cold open now.
That's right. Okay, here we go. My name is Jeff Irving, and this is the Vrahode Tavern Podcast. I am the creator of the Vrahode game system, and in this podcast, we're going to do a deep dive into the lore and gameplay of Vrahode. I'm joined by Brandon Rollins, who will be acting as a stand-in for you, asking many of the questions you might be curious about yourself. Brandon, what are we talking about today?
Well, we are going to kick off a 5-part series where we talk about all of the crafted races of Vrahode. And we're splitting this up into 5 episodes. We're going to do 2 at a time. And for this very first one, we're going to do the Mynoc and the Toreln.
Yes, we got a request, I think, from one of our fans to start with those 2 races, and I'm more than happy to do that.
Mm-hmm. And that's a really good idea because there's just so much lore to dive into. And I think this is the kind of thing that people are going to really want to know more about.
Definitely. I'll tell you what I'd like to do is once we conclude the mini series of talking about the crafted races of Vrahode, I would love to follow up and do a small series about the other races that are involved in the Vrahode game system that are not crafted, including the Accourisch, the Quayon, the Vrahode, and even perhaps some of the races that are part of our kind of, the backstory of the world, including the Pregenerated and maybe even a couple other lesser known races that have come to Vrahode in the distant past. And maybe we just get glimpses of their presence still in the game series. So that might be kind of fun too, depending on what, if people show interest in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that would be an interesting subject to cover for sure, because the ones that we're going to be talking about in this 5-part series are all playable, right?
Yeah, these are all, well, not all of them are playable in the core box. In the core box, we give players access to 6 of the 10. There are 4 races that are crafted that have yet to come to grips with the scale of the threat to the world. And so the first 6 playable races that are in the core box are the Mynoc, the Toreln, the Calteeryn, the Drellrune, the Mahari, and the Athakul. And then in expansion 2, I should say, we add the last 4 crafted races and make those playable. And that is the Sahrun, the Juern, the Chorn, and the Greenling.
You've made the decision to add more playable races to the expansions relatively recently, right? Like that was the last handful of months.
Well, yeah, it was. And a lot of people liked the idea. They were liking the art of the other 4 races. They were asking questions about them. And I had a discussion, and it's been longer than that. I had a discussion with the writer about that idea of including them. And he was great with that. In other words, his writing and the ability to move forward from expansion 2 into expansion 3 with all 10 of the crafted races being available, it gave us an opportunity to add new roles to 6 new roles, which is our equivalent of classes to the game. It added, of course, the 4 races, but it also added a lot of new abilities and skills to the decks. And so people who, play through the core box in the first expansion, they get kind of a refresh and the ability to add new skills that weren't available until that point in the story arc.
Yeah, definitely. Something new to keep you hooked. So I think maybe the best way to even really approach talking about these is to start with the pre-generated heroes, because every playable race, as I understand it, has 2 playable heroes by default, no customization. So why don't you talk a little bit about the pre-generated heroes for, let's say, just the Mynoc. Let's focus on Mynoc for now.
Okay, we'll start with the Mynoc race. So we give you Kinezra and Shiroku. Those are the two pre-generated heroes from the Mynoc race. And Kinezra is an augur, which is kind of, I guess, the easiest way to describe what an augur is in Vrahode. They are kind of like war priests. So, you know, they have the ability to wear some bandit armor. They don't quite rise to the level of wearing some of the fancier, more elaborate plate mails, but you know, they can be well protected. And as an augur, as a war priest, you have the ability to be in melee, but also Kinezra has decent healing abilities, and so he's a good party member because he can heal his comrades during battle. He has a battle heal that he can use twice per battle. And then Shiroku, she is an arbiter, and so the decks that the arbiter has access to mostly are the spirit deck and the mind deck. And so where the augur is primarily straight spirit, so Kinezra is more straight spirit. Shiroku, as an arbiter, she is primarily spirit, but her mind stat is higher. And so that gives her those abilities to kind of cast some more what I would call mage-like skills. And so that's the two pre-generated heroes from the Mynoc race.
Mm-hmm. And where do these guys live? If memory serves, they live on their own island, right?
Yeah. The Mynoc live in an area of a larger forest. They live in an area of the Watching Woods, which is on Prahar. It is the leafward-most island on the known lands of Vrahode. So basically, we don't have north, south, east, and west. We have iceward, stormward, tailward, and leafward, which is in our world the equivalent of east. So they live on this island called Prahar in an area called the Darkened Grove. It's a fungal forest within the larger Watching Woods. So the Watching Woods is a huge forest, and then there's an area kind of nestled with mountains around it called the Darkened Grove. And so their village of Stratholm is there in the Darkened Grove. And it is a bit isolated from the largest and most populated island on Vrahode, which is called Rendur. But one of the things I just added to the overland map are world stone locations. And Prahar is lucky enough to have a world stone location on the leafward-most end of that island in region 353. So if the Mynoc race wants to travel across the globe in a fast way, they're lucky enough to have a world stone there on their island.
Yeah, and I have to imagine that makes the isolation less of a big deal for them.
Well, yeah, you've got world stones. You got a couple world stones on the mainland mass of Rendur that are, you know, they're far flung, and then you've got one on Prahar. There's a couple large islands in the world of Vrahode that do not have world stones, and that is the icy island of Nirlin, which is far iceward, and also the far tailward island of Duwara. It also is devoid of a world stone, and so those two landmasses are much more isolated because of that. The only way you're going to get to those islands is via ship. You're going to have to travel by sea to get there.
Mm-hmm. So what's the description on the back of their card?
On the Mynoc?
Yeah, on the Mynoc. Wait,
okay,
is it different by character? I should probably ask.
No. So the way we've designed the hero cards and the custom hero cards in the Vrahode game system is that the front of the card is for the specific hero. Okay, it's going to list their from the pre-generated standpoint. It's going to list their starting gear that we've picked out for you. It's going to list their skills. We pick those out for you with pre-generated heroes, and the restrictions of that role, you know, that pre-generated hero role, are also on the front of the card. So everything related to the pre-generated hero and their role is the front. The back of the cards, whether it be pre-generated or custom heroes, because you can, you know, of course, create custom heroes in our world, and we encourage you to do that. But on the back of the card is all race related. So everything on the back is race related. And so it might be good, since we're talking, we're starting to talk about the back of the card, to just go ahead and maybe give you the description of the race, just give you the what we give you on the back. And this is just a taste of the lore. Okay, this is just what will fit on the back of a poker-sized card. So it's not a lot of information about the race, but it's just kind of a hook. So I'll go ahead and read that to you. So, living in a shared existence with the endless tendrils of the great spire, Mineholm, the Mynoc are as much a single entity as they are a people. Their fungal colony, Stradholm, rests upon the stump of an ancient tree whose name is lost to time, but whose limbs once grasped above the clouds. They are the watchers of the darkened grove, a mushroom forest where their rule finds them. But their borders begin to relent, saplings of alder and oak growing where once were only mushrooms. And so we give you this, we kind of set up the race and its place in the world with the description, and that's the Mynoc.
Cool. Now, on the back of the card, do you also have like other things on there, like their traits and abilities and restrictions?
Yes, absolutely. Let's talk about racial traits a little bit. So the Vrahode game system is designed to be easy to learn, easy to teach, accessible. We stay away from complex iconography, and we try to make all of the language on the cards kind of intuitive on its face. So you're not having to look into rule books and to figure out what cryptic things mean. We're trying to keep it pretty much plain spoken. So the racial traits are these for the Mynoc. So this is going to apply to Knesra, the Augur. It's going to apply to Shiroku, the Arbiter. It's also going to apply to any of the custom heroes that you would create using the Mynoc race. So again, this is going to apply to any Mynoc character in the game. So their racial traits are they're immune to paralysis effect. This is great. So based on their race, and the way their physiology is, paralysis effects just don't work on the Mynoc. So that's great. So when your party members might be getting paralyzed in battle against particularly nasty foes, the Mynoc is going to stand tall and keep on fighting. So that's nice. They have +1 skill rolls in forest battles. So because the Mynoc are, their city, their culture is used to dark fungal forests, their skill rolls, which is, every hero's most potent attacks, and it's powered by their rule, which is what we call magic in the world of Vrahode, is rule. And so they have +1 skill rolls in forest battles. That's very helpful. But because the Mynoc did not grow up in complete darkness underground, they have a -1 to rolls in the underlands. So as dark and gloomy as the forests and the darkened grove are, they're still at a little bit of a disadvantage in the underlands. And so, obviously that -1 to rolls in the underlands is due to complete blackness. They have no visual reference points that they can discern in the underlands. They have to have a light source. So if there's a light source available in the party, or if you're playing solo, as long as they have a light source, lantern, torch, or other item, then that -1 to rolls is mitigated.
Yeah, and I think a long time ago you had mentioned to me that they're quite sensitive to damage. And now I might be getting them confused with someone else, but I think it's the Mynoc.
It is. Yeah, no, their skin is very soft. And I mean, think about what mushrooms are like. And these are essentially fungal warriors. They tend to enjoy either doing their rule, from a distance, or armoring up. So, so for example, Knesra, he's a war priest, and he is not going to be up close in battle unless he's armored, obviously to protect his skin. And they also shy away from cutting weapons. They're just not fans of swords and that sort of thing. They tend towards either a piercing weapon or blunt weapons. So they are not, they're never, you're never going to be able to use a sword with a Mynoc.
Oh, it just makes perfect sense. I mean, anthropologically, they would probably they would have quite a taboo against using weapons that would be dangerous to the person wielding them.
Yeah. So I mean, I can tell you this: the breadth of weaponry that's offered in our system, you're never going to miss it. I mean, yes, there are going to be times when you're finding cutting weapons, and you can sell those, obviously, and get the value from them if you're a Mynoc, or you can trade with your party mates, because someone else might find a really cool two-handed hammer that they can use, but you may have a sword that they want. You give them the sword and you get the hammer, and so you're going to stick to blunt weapons. They can use piercing weapons like arrows and things like that, but just this idea of a big blade near their skin is something that they shy away from.
Oh yeah, it would probably gross them out quite a bit just thinking about it.
Yeah.
So
you want to talk about abilities?
Yeah. Let's talk about abilities and restrictions as well.
Well, the only restriction really is what we just talked about, the cutting weapons.
Yeah, we can't really do cutting weapons. That makes sense.
So as long as you're, if you're playing these heroes, just be aware of that. And if that's a big deal to you, if you like to be a swashbuckler and you like to have swords and use those, the Mynoc is probably not the race for you. However, there are plenty of blunt weapons in the game, and plenty of even blunt weapons that are dual wieldable, which is a big deal. A lot of people in the game love to dual wield because it gives you additional chances to hit every time you're doing that, and they have the ability to do that as long as they're blunt. So, but moving on to abilities, I'm crazy about the racial abilities of the Mynoc. Every race has two racial abilities. And basically the way racial abilities work is it's like a skill that costs you rule to use, but it's free. And the reason you have these abilities is because of your race. And so the abilities are going to feel like they fit with that race. They make sense. Okay, so the Mynoc. So this is going to be Kinezra. This is going to be Shiroku. This is going to be any custom Mynoc hero that you would roll up. These are the two racial abilities that all of those will have access to. They have one called Mycelic Healing. This is a battle heal. Okay, so it's going to heal 4 damage on touch to a friendly target twice per battle. So you can use that twice. So you've basically got 8 total points of damage that you're going to be able to heal on a friendly target, which, obviously if you needed to heal yourself, you're a friendly target. You can do that too. You can heal yourself. The second racial ability is called Choking Spores. And this is, I'll tell you, whenever anybody plays a Mynoc, this is a skill that they use often. You can use this as often as you like. There's no restrictions on this one like there is with the Mycelic Healing. So basically it causes 2 damage for 3 rounds to a target enemy this battle, and it is range 10. So you're going to treat this as
that's a considerable range.
Yeah, 10. And that's the nice thing about it, because a lot of times when a battle ensues, the enemy isn't very close. And so this racial ability allows you to kind of reach out across the battlefield and get this choking spores hung on them. And so it's a damage over time effect. It puts a 2x poison effect on that enemy. So for 3 rounds following when you use the racial ability. So it doesn't start when you use it. It starts the next round. But it's going to be 2 points of damage to that enemy for 3 rounds. So a total of 6 damage over those 3 rounds. And so it's very effective. You use it one turn. The very next turn, you could use it on that same enemy again, or you could use it on another enemy. So as long as you're willing to basically pay the expense of the racial abilities, which is the time. If I use a racial ability on my turn, I can't also do a physical attack or do a spell. So I'm giving up that round to use that racial ability. So as long as you don't mind paying that cost of the round to do it, then you can continue to use that. And again, there's no cost to you in rule because it is based on your race.
Yeah, and that's like, remind me again about the rules on specifically how you can use his abilities. Like, you can only use them a certain amount of times in battle, right?
Well, no. The mycelic healing, it says heal 4 damage on touch to friendly target twice per battle. So that one is limited to 2 times per battle. Their second racial ability, choking spores, you can use that as many times as you like in a battle. So you can use it each turn if you like. So there's no limit to how many times, and it doesn't cost you any rule because it is a racial ability. You can use that ability because you are a Mynoc.
Okay, so really the only limited thing it takes up is just your action per turn.
Yep.
Cool. Let's see. So I guess if you're making a custom hero, what would make somebody pick Mynoc over anything else?
I don't know. I mean, it depends on your build. What do you think? If you can't use a sword, if you can't use blades, that might sway you away from a Mynoc if that's what you like. But I think any there's so many weapon choices that aren't cutting. I think they're well suited for anything. I think if you look at their race as just at the abilities, they've got a damage racial ability and they've got a healing racial ability. So to me, that's what that speaks to is versatility, right? You're missing the versatility of the cutting weapons, but your racial abilities are quite versatile. So, I think they would be great for just about any build. I think just about any build would work well with the Mynoc.
Even like a bruiser type?
I think properly armored, you know what I mean, with enough mitigation, because we don't have defense rolls in the Vrahode game system. We just have gear mitigation. So you've got gear protection. And I think as long as their mitigation score is high enough, you could be a bruiser. But that's more based on gear really than race. You know what I mean? I think they're versatile. That's what I see when I look at the Mynocs is they're whenever you can start out a hero, whatever build you do, with a healing ability for your comrades or you and an attack, a damage over time attack, that's good. That's good.
Absolutely. So then you've got your other kind of plant-based crafted race, which is going to be your Toreln as well. So let's see. Let's talk about these guys a little bit. First, can you just kind of describe for folks who haven't heard any of the past podcasts what they look like, and then go into talking about what the pre-generated heroes are like?
Sure. Well, one of the things that's funny about today is we're basically talking about the giants of the game, the Mynoc and the Toreln. They're the tallest races that exist on Vrahode that have been crafted. So the only race that is taller than the Mynoc is the Toreln. And so the Toreln race was crafted from the forest, where the Mynoc were crafted from a mushroom-based life form, and then imbued with a soul, if you will. The Toreln is basically a soul combined with literally with the trees of the forest. So they're quite literally in nature, incarnate as a tree. And so they're 10, 12 feet tall, very tall. They really don't speak other than telepathically. They can tell you their thoughts and do that, but they really don't have mouths like the rest of the races do. They're just different in that sense. But they're massive. And the miniatures, when you play the game, they tower over everybody else. It's really cool to play a Toreln and see them on the battlefield. But the pre-generated heroes that we have for the Toreln are Piril, the male, who is a shield, which is kind of a paladin archetype, I would say. Defensive warrior, great on the front lines. Gear-wise, with him, you start with an axe, a shield, and decent, simple studded leather armor. So he's got some decent armor. he starts out with 2 body skills, Zealous Defender and Bulwark of Might, and he starts out with 1 spirit skill that is called Weapon of Wrath. And again, these starting skills are designed to kind of purify this hero's archetype, and really each of the skills to give you the idea of this protective warrior. The other pre-generated hero of the Toreln race is Harna, and she is our Oracle. And so she is very much the opposite of Shiroku, where Shiroku is primarily spirit with a little bit of mind. Harna is primarily mind with a little bit of spirit. And so you're kind of flipping that archetype around and giving her more mage-like direct damage from distance skills and a little bit of healing. And so she's going to start with some pretty basic cloth armor, some bandages to heal, a stone dagger, so just a small melee weapon, which can also be thrown. Her role restrictions as an oracle. Okay, this has nothing to do with her race, but as an oracle, she is not to use long or heavy weapons. And the limit to her armor is simple studded armor or less. So any of the leather armors are fine for her to upgrade to, but she cannot exceed leather armor and go into chain, bandit, or plate. And so she's going to stay light and mobile with her armor use. And you'll find that kind of rationale play through all of the heroes, pre-generated heroes, is that the less a hero, their role is designed to be on the front lines in melee, the lower the upper threshold of their armor use is. So if you're not on the front lines, chances are you're not going to be able to use plate mail. You're going to be down in the lower tiers of armor. And so that is basically our Oracle hero, Harna.
Mm-hmm.
And so
a pretty kind of like a medic or a priest kind of role.
I would definitely, yeah. We can talk about her. We can talk about her skills too while we're on the topic of pre-generated heroes. She starts out with two mind skills and 1 spirit skill, because her mind is highest, then spirit. So she gets incorporeal, which allows her to become incorporeal, travel. I think up to her maximum movement rate. It might be slightly reduced, and then return to her corporeal form. And so that allows her to pass through walls, doors, to get away from situations where she's under threat. Shocking Bolt is her other mind skill. It's a great one because it targets up to 3 enemies. It just kind of forks around the battlefield. You don't have to target them directly. The Shocking Bolt just kind of seeks out enemies up to 3. And it's going to do, I think, 3 damage to each enemy. And remember, a lot of these skills are scalable. So where Shocking Bolt initially might do 3 points of damage to up to 3 enemies, you're able to later, as your mind skill increases, to actually kind of pay more rule to have that Shocking Bolt do more damage. And so Shocking Bolt is one of those ones where it's going to do that. It's going to scale up. And then her last skill in spirit is called Sanctified Ground. And so basically what she does is she can sanctify like a 2x2 area on an encounter map, a battlefield. And as long as her comrades or she is standing inside that sanctified ground, they get a buff. And so they get some protection from this kind of, holy ground that she's created. And then again, this is a scalable skill. So she can increase the area of that sanctified ground so that it's bigger and can hold more friendlies. And so that's Harna. I mean, she's cool. I can't wait to play her. I haven't had the opportunity to play her yet. I've run demos where people have played her and really enjoyed her and basically just worn out Shocking Bolt on enemies. It's been kind of cool to watch because, with a lot of the magic or the rule in the game, a lot of that damage from magic is just automatic.
Just complete left field question here. pre-gen hero do you think is probably a breakout hit so far?
I'll tell you what, people love Kariv. Kariv is a Mahari, and she is a siren.
Oh, I played as her the other day. Yeah.
Yeah. So she's got, I mean, I think she's a really nice little Swiss Army knife hero because she's got the ability to have an enemy attack a second enemy. So Confused Allegiance, it costs her 2 rule to use it. So it's kind of an expensive skill. But man, is it nice to have an enemy turn on another enemy for you. She has Aura of Adoration, so she can basically become a non-enemy. The enemies, they see her as a friend. And I think the thing that people like the most, and she uses this, every time I've run the demo, she's used this ability a lot. It's Battle Hymn. So basically she comes up behind the front lines and just parks and starts singing. And everything within 6 spaces of her voice, all the friendlies get a +1 to rolls and the enemies get a -1 to rolls. And so basically she is buffing and debuffing at the same time with her voice. And then I think the other thing, I don't want to get too deep into the Mahari. We'll talk about that race later. But I think as a class or as a role, the Siren is a really, really interesting and role to play in the game within a party.
Oh yeah, definitely. And having playtested with her myself, I agree. I mean, it's immediately obvious the kind of things you can do with her.
Well, and I would say that's in the Overlands. I mean, when you're playing in the Overlands, I think Kariv is our breakout hit, the one that people are really, really loving. But when we've been doing Underlands demos, I think the breakout hit there is either Drista or Grendlum. And that's the 2 heroes from the Athak Ul race. They're the only subterranean race. They don't have that -1 penalty for the dark because they live there. But their ability to short fly and fly over difficult terrain, and just the fact that their magic is based on just this bloodlust and this desire to just have blood everywhere in the battle, it makes them like this unsavory little irresistible hero that people want to play. It's cool.
Yeah, there's a certain kind of darkness to that I think people just really like.
Yeah, since we don't have like a necromancer type hero in the pre-generateds that we offer, I think the Athak will satisfy that sort of dark desire that people have to play something a bit unsavory.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So
I guess back to Toreln.
Okay.
So what's the description on the back of the card say?
Okay, so it says there is less known about the Toreln even than the Mahari of Dawara, but this little is accepted as fact, that they are a proud people, strong as the trees they live within, and swift against any danger. They are believed to live only high among the boughs of the forest, their village ill knew, seeming not to have been built there, but rather woven into being by the trees themselves. That also is where the Toreln are believed to derive their rule. So basically, we're just speaking to the fact that this race, the Toreln race, uses their rule to kind of manipulate and warp and weave the resource that their magic is connected to, which is the trees. And so they can literally take a tree and shape it into a home, within a tree, using their rule. So it just makes sense that they would live, kind of up in and among the trees.
I wonder, why don't they live on the forest floor? It seems like it'd be easier to live there, unless there's something I'm not accounting for.
Well, I can tell you this. Every biome in the world of Vrahode has kind of a unique mathematics to it. And the risks and rewards of going into any forest regions, into that biome in the world of Vrahode, the risk is higher and the reward is higher. And so I'm assuming that their choice to live up in the boughs of the trees has everything to do with what's going on the forest floor. And I can tell you that, there are some pretty nasty things that wander the forests of Vrahode, even in the core box. Things out of legend. I mean, our forests are pretty scary. And so I think they're just doing it so that they can raise their young in safety and kind of keep an eye on what's going on below.
makes a lot of sense, especially if the forests are a pretty dangerous place to live in the first place. So, what kind of traits and abilities do they have that we might not have discussed?
Different than the Mynoc, where the Mynoc are immune to paralysis, because the Toreln are essentially living trees. And I mean, trees are alive, but I mean, they're the combination of a tree with imbued essentially with more of a true human soul, or humanoid soul. They're immune to knockdowns. So they're essentially, when they walk around and they're in battles, they're kind of rooted to the ground. And so you can't knock them over. So instead of an immunity to paralysis, they're immune to knockdown. Like the Mynoc, they have an advantage in the forest. But instead of the Mynoc, where they have +1 to skill rolls in forest battles, the Toreln have +1 mitigation in forest battles. And so they have greater protection against attacks. They can call in branches around them, to kind of give them some of the protection. So they're +1 mitigation. And like the Mynoc, they're at -1 rolls in the Underlands. And so they're going to need to find a light source when they're in the Underlands to mitigate that darkness penalty. And so those are the traits of the Toreln.
And what about their restrictions?
Racial restrictions for the Toreln, there are none. However, when you look at the roles of the Toreln, Pyrrhal has none. Pyrrhal has no restrictions on the armor that he can wear, the weapons that he can use. But Harna, the Oracle, because she is not a frontline battler, she works from a distance. She cannot use long or heavy weapons, nor can she use anything above leather armor. So simple studded armor or less for Harna. So yeah, that's the restrictions on the Toreln. And again, those are just based on that Oracle role.
Now, let's say I'm making a custom hero based on the Toreln. Why would I want to pick them over someone else?
I just love the idea of immunity to knockdown. I think that's a great thing to start a hero with. Obviously, there's lots and lots of forests in Vrahode. It's covered in forests. And so to have greater protection in any forest battle, even a +1, that's considerable. And also, I think what we haven't talked about yet is the racial abilities of the Toreln. And I think that's the main reason someone might choose to play a Toreln, whether that be one of the pre-generated heroes or to roll up a custom Toreln hero, male or female. And their racial abilities are this. The first one is called Thorny Disposition. Some of the skills in the game have a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek kind of name. We have fun with the naming. We don't take ourselves too seriously, and calling a racial ability Thorny Disposition is just fun. It's cool. So each successful melee attack on this hero causes 1 damage to the attacker this battle, and it may not be mitigated. So that's nice. So if you're a target and you're being attacked in melee by enemies, they need to know that they'll be taking a point of damage too. So basically you have the ability to grow this kind of thorny skin or bark that is hurting your attackers. I love that. It's a great defensive skill. Well, I should say it's a great defensive racial ability because it doesn't cost you any rule to use it, to put it in place. You simply declare, I'm using Thorny Disposition, and that is your action for the turn, and then it is in place for the entire battle for you. So it's a really cool thing to kind of, like, the first turn in battle, you hang that so that you know that anytime you attack that battle, they're going to take a point of damage when they attack you. I love that. The second one is called Forest Fury. This is the second Toreln racial ability, and it adds +1 range and +1 damage to ranged attacks this battle. So basically, if I'm using a bow and arrow, if I'm using a hand axe, if I'm using a spear, if I'm using daggers, anything that can be thrown, okay, I'm going to get a +1 range and damage with that. So the Toreln just know ranged attacks. And so this is a great offensive skill. I mean, to be able to reach farther and do more damage, I mean, who doesn't want that, right?
Absolutely. And those seem like good reasons for picking one of the Toreln.
I love it. I love this race. And when I initially came up with the world of Vrahode, and I was thinking about the story of Vrahode as a series of novels, the main character in the novels was Piril, was this male Toreln shield. And so they're near and dear to my heart, and they came came to me first. The race I wanted first in the story was the Toreln.
Yeah, and I can see that because when you actually look at the art, it's pretty compelling. Like you immediately want to know more about them.
Yeah, I do. I do think it's compelling. I'm trying to think who created that art. I think it was a Russian guy, Mikhail Palamarchuk. Yeah, Mikhail Palamarchuk of Russia is the guy that created the Toreln.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah.
Let's see. Is there anything else you want to cover about the Mynoc and the Toreln?
Well, I just would say, both of these are great races. They have, I think they're similar. I like the idea with the Toreln that I have use of cutting weapons as well, which is a little bit of an advantage over the Mynoc. But I love the +1 skill rolls in Forest for the Mynoc. So I think they both have very unique racial abilities. I think they have great racial traits. They're both pretty near and dear to my heart, and so I think you can't go wrong with either one.
Yeah, and I will say, like, from what I've seen in testing so far, the characters seem pretty balanced. Not only just the races, but like the actual pre-generated heroes, they all seem pretty balanced. So it's kind of like there might be a little FOMO where you choose to play one over the other, but there are no bad options here.
No. And let's look at their movement too, because movement is one of the things in the world of Vrahode that does not change. Your ability to move around the encounter maps is based on your race, and you can modify your movement rates temporarily, but it will always return back to the native movement of your race. And so as we compare the movement rates of the Toreln versus the Mynoc, we have the Toreln have a movement rate of 7, okay? And the Mynoc have a movement rate of 6. So if movement is a consideration for you, then the Toreln are a bit more mobile than are the Mynoc. But their starting maximum life is the same. They both start out the game with 15 life, which is a lot. That's on the higher end of the spectrum for our heroes. And so both of the Mynoc and the Toreln could be considered pretty robust.
Yeah, both of them you can get around pretty easy.
Yeah. Well, what do you think? You want me to go ahead and take us out, and we can wrap this up, and then maybe we'll do some more of this.
Yeah, I'd say go ahead and take us out. And for the next one, just to tease it for everybody listening, we're going to be covering the Calteeryn and the Drellrune.
Yes, can't wait. All right. Well, thank you for listening to the Vrahode Tavern podcast. If you've enjoyed this show, take a moment and subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please leave a 5-star review. It helps more than you know. You can learn more about Vrahode on vrahode.com. That's VRAHODE.com. Link in the show notes. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, where we're at Vrahode. Thank you again for listening. We really appreciate it, and keep an eye out for our next episode in 2 weeks.